Senator Schatz.
Thank you. Just to follow up on Senator Collins' line of questioning, I guess the analogy is, say a hospital that's running inefficiently, and a turnaround guy comes in and says, I got a plan for reorganizing this hospital. We're going to do delivery system reform. We're going to use technology. We're going to be aggressive. We're going to be fearless. And in the meantime, we're going to lay off half of our staff because this thing doesn't work efficiently. The practical impact of that is death. And that's what we're talking about. And so every time we talk about the practical, near-term, immediate, real-world, geopolitical, and humanitarian impacts of what has happened, especially to U.S. aid, you pivot very skillfully and maybe even correctly to what needs to be reformed in the State Department itself and in the interaction and relationship between aid and state. That's not what I'm asking you about. I'm asking you about why in the world we wouldn't do this in the regular order. In order to put U.S. aid under the State Department and better align it, we need a statute.
Let's talk about. This isn't about cutting inefficiencies alone. It's about pulling life, saving resources from people who depend on them for survival. And it's happening not because of a lack of compassion or intention, but because the system is being dismantled too quickly and without thoughtful planning. Senators and aid organizations have warned that these aid cuts are being implemented without the due process required by law. Instead of drafting, debating, and passing legislation that would guide reform, drastic measures are being taken unilaterally. This bypassing of regular order leaves little room for oversight, collaboration, or adjustment. In doing so, long-standing aid programs that took years to build are being dismantled in a matter of months. Humanitarian groups on the ground are forced to vacate areas they've served for decades, not because they failed in their mission, but because the funding was ripped away overnight. In many of these places, there's no backup plan. When the U.S. pulls out, no one else steps in, or worse, rival powers with questionable motives like the Chinese government swoop in and fill the void, not just with similar services, but sometimes with the exact same programs. This shift undermines American influence, destabilizes entire regions, and compromises global security. And in regions where no one steps in, the result is even more tragic. Famine, disease outbreaks, preventable deaths. Children who used to receive regular meals are now surviving on half rations. Infants born with HIV no longer have access to basic treatment. This is not a budget debate. This is a matter of life and death. Even more disturbing is that these decisions are often justified in the name of efficiency or bold reform, but there is no immediate replacement for the services being terminated. The humanitarian crisis that follows is not an accidental side effect. It's an inevitable result. Reforming a flawed system is a worthy goal, but doing so without safeguards, timelines, or consultation puts lives at risk. In these moments, the failure to follow legislative process isn't just a technical error, it becomes a moral failure. The result is that America, long seen as a beacon of hope and a lifeline for millions, is now viewed by some as unpredictable, unreliable, and indifferent to the suffering its policies create. The cost of bypassing the proper channels of governance is not measured in dollars. It's measured in lives lost.
In order to reform all of these programs, we need an SFOPS bill. You can't just come in and light the place on fire and say, well, it was a mess. And so I just want to understand what's the path forward, because people really are dying. It's not as though Catholic Relief Services or CARE or the World Food Program are a bunch of leftists coming out and complaining about everything that's happening because they want to get you. This is actually happening. People are vacating where they work, and then in some instances, the Chinese government comes in and provides the exact same service, not a similar service, but the same program. They just do it. We'll do it. And then in some instances, nobody does it, and as a result, people die. And so I'm just wondering, where do you think the path forward is for us to work Article 1, Article 2, former colleagues, to get this thing back on track?
Well, I think the first path is, let me just say on the regular order part, sure, we want to do that. It would be great to make all these things statutory and codify them. That would be ideal. I will say I was a member of this body for, I don't know, 6, 12, 30, 40, 16 years, and we always talked about doing it by regular order. We never got to it. So now's the time to do it because we really have to do it now. The second point I would make is the U.S. is going to continue to be a very generous donor for humanity. I would venture to guess that for the rest of our lifetime, no nation on earth, if we can still afford it, no nation on earth will continue to do more for humanitarian assistance, for food and medicine and life-saving services, and even for developmental assistance. But I also think we have to recognize this.
Instead, the current approach resembles a firestorm. Programs are being cut or completely shut down with no gradual transition, no consultation with stakeholders, and no safety nets for those who rely on these programs for survival. This method of implementing reform not only causes chaos on the ground, but also leads to confusion among America's international partners. Organizations like CARE, the World Food Program, and Catholic Relief Services, nonpartisan and deeply rooted in humanitarian work, are being forced to halt their missions or dramatically scale down their services. These are not political groups trying to undermine reform. They are professionals witnessing the devastating real-world consequences of poorly executed changes. Their warnings should be taken seriously, yet their voices are often brushed aside or redirected in the name of restructuring. As the process spirals out of control, the United States' reputation is taking a serious hit. For decades, America has been seen as a dependable ally in times of crisis, a global leader in humanitarian aid. But now, as programs disappear overnight and communities are abandoned without explanation, trust in U.S. leadership is eroding. Partner nations and NGO alike are beginning to question whether America can still be counted on to uphold its commitments. This reputational damage is hard to quantify, but its effects are profound and long-lasting. Once trust is broken, it is difficult, sometimes impossible, to rebuild. There is also the issue of legal and constitutional integrity. Reforming federal agencies and redirecting government funds require cooperation between the executive and legislative branches. By skipping over Congress, the executive branch not only weakens democratic norms, but also sets a dangerous precedent for future policy decisions. What message does it send when the administration acts unilaterally on matters that impact millions of lives globally? It says that due process doesn't matter. It says that oversight is optional, and it suggests that the end justifies the means, even if the end results in human suffering. The question isn't whether reform is needed. Everyone agrees that the foreign aid system is bloated and in need of modernization. The question is how to do it without triggering catastrophic consequences. Reform should be strategic, humane, and lawful. It should involve lawmakers, field experts, and international partners working together.
We cannot continue to be the foreign aid provider for everyone on everything. We just can't do it. We can't do it efficiently. And we cannot afford to do it either. And if we're going to, we do not have unlimited resources. And so we've now entered an era, particularly of geopolitics, where we have to be very careful about where we invest our money, where we provide aid. Humanitarian systems aside, okay, you have a mudslide somewhere, an earthquake, a hurricane, and we're going to help people. I don't know how much we would want necessarily geopolitics to play into those sorts of decisions.
What's the proposed budget cut in the humanitarian accounts?
Well, it's not the humanitarian account right now. Basically, is the rest of it is reflected at over 50% in the proposed amount that you have right now before you. But we believe that we can provide these essential services while reducing some of the redundancies that were happening through this.
This bloated system, sometimes referred to as the foreign aid industrial complex, and not only wastes resources, but also slows down the delivery of urgent humanitarian services. Food meant for starving children takes longer to arrive. Medical supplies needed to fight disease sit idle as contracts get passed around. Meanwhile, the people in need, those facing famine, displacement, or illness, wait helplessly as paperwork and negotiations consume valuable time. This inefficiency doesn't just affect short-term emergencies, it undermines long-term development efforts by diverting funds away from core needs and toward administrative overhead. Reforming this system is essential and long overdue. Reducing the number of intermediaries would not only save money, but also improve the speed and effectiveness of aid delivery. There are credible ways to do this without compromising quality or accountability. For example, U.S. embassies operating in foreign nations are in a strong position to identify reliable local organizations and service providers. These embassies have on-the-ground knowledge and can recommend trusted partners to receive aid directly, cutting out unnecessary subcontractors. This approach would ensure that more resources go directly to those in need rather than being absorbed by layers of management. However, this necessary reform should not be used as justification for cutting vital services or implementing abrupt, destabilizing changes. Efficiency should not come at the cost of lives. The goal must be to make the system better, not to dismantle it without a clear plan for how to maintain aid delivery. Streamlining processes and holding contractors accountable are worthwhile objectives, but they should be done carefully, with attention to humanitarian outcomes and coordination with experienced aid organizations. Another key consideration is transparency. The complex web of subcontractors often makes it difficult to trace how funds are being used. By simplifying the system, not only would the aid process become faster and more effective, but it would also become more transparent to you, taxpayers and international observers. This would help restore confidence in America's foreign aid strategy and prove that efficiency and compassion can go hand in hand.
Because if we establish a bunch of criteria and requirements and pre-audit, then you increase administrative costs, right? And I'm one of these people who thinks that it's not unreasonable to start to capitate or slowly ramp down administrative costs. But administrative costs are not 88%, right? That 12% versus the rest of it cut is what money goes to local NGOs in Africa or Asia or Pacific Islands or wherever. And we should be increasing that number, and we have been increasing that number. But it is the precipitousness with which this is all being done that is actually causing reputational damage. A lot of us are doing CODELs, and when we sort of go overseas and we sort of, temporarily take off our partisan hats, we interact with the same providers, and we see kids on half rations getting smaller and smaller. We see kids getting HIV/AIDS from their parents, and nothing you said, in order to implement anything that you're talking about, is it necessary for us to allow children to die? And yet that is what's happening. And so can we please separate these two questions of should we reform the State Department, should we reform the foreign aid enterprise, and should we do it in such a catastrophically unlawful way that people around the world die and people come to believe that they can't believe that America is a reliable partner anymore. And so if we can please separate these questions and get to writing a bill, I think the country will be better for it.